Hello, Elder Smith here. Now, today I'm recording this on Sunday because I record my sermons before the congregation as well, and I felt that this particular sermon should be posted on my YouTube channel. So without further ado, here it is. Good morning. The subject that's pressing on my mind has to do with the mustard seed. Now, I've heard many examples being told about it, but usually leads to the same thing over and over again, which is where Jesus talks about having faith like a mustard seed. Now, there is truth to it, but the reason I'm pointing this detail out is because this isn't the only thing. Faith isn't the only thing that Jesus used to illustrate as a mustard seed. He also did it with the kingdom of heaven itself. This is actually described in Matthew. Let me double check here. I believe it's chapter 13. Yep, Matthew chapter 13, verse 31. And it says, "And another parable put he forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is like to a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all the seeds. But when it is grown, it is becoming the greatest among the herbs. It becometh a tree, so that the birds of the air come and lodge in the branches thereof." Now that parable ends right there. One of the shorter parables that Jesus spoke of. Now, we gotta stop and think about this. This can be confusing when you speed through it, but to understand what the parables are symbolic for, you have to take them and entertain them temporarily as something literal, because the literal perspective allows you to see the symbolic perspective in a new light. For one thing, we're taught to sow seeds. We're taught to sow the seeds in people that we are to plant, we are to water and take care of. Sometimes we forget just the literal pacing of how long it takes for a seed to grow into a full plant, regardless of what that plant is. For that reason, sometimes when we preach the truth, or when we talk about Jesus, or we try to talk scripture to people, we try to explain to them what scripture means, and it seems like we're not getting through to them. It has no effect on them. We got to remember, by saying what we said to them, we just planted the seeds. Seeds don't sprout and grow in a matter of seconds. It takes a long time for a literal seed to grow into a plant. So just because you don't see the effects right away doesn't mean the seeds aren't planted, and it doesn't mean that they are not growing. But it may take a long time. Who knows? Maybe someone that told you in the beginning they don't want to hear it may years later even come back being the ones talking about it all of a sudden. Suddenly the desire that seemed to not be there in the beginning is there. That's the Spirit of God working in them. But also it is given to us to sow the seeds among the people. We are not to hide ourselves, but to reveal ourselves to the world. We're not to be a part of the world, but we are in it. Now, I decided, just for the sake of it, because I'm one of those types that knows that I've probably seen something, but didn't know what it was by name. So I Googled the image of what a mustard tree looks like. And to be honest with you, I'm glad I did, because there is a physical difference between it and the other trees that I've seen. It's one of those trees that their branches expand far outward, more than any other tree I've honestly ever seen, to the point where I believe multiple birds could build multiple nests in one tree without interfering in each other's territory. And I'm not exaggerating. From the images I saw online, those trees width-wise, with the branches and everything, they are huge. Now, I believe that's what the kingdom of heaven is supposed to be like. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the eternal one we go to. We got to remember, there is a kingdom that's here on earth right now, which is the church. I believe when he's talking about the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a mustard seed, he's talking about the church. Because the kingdom of heaven, that's above, that's eternal. That one that we're going to go to someday, that doesn't need us to take care of it. It is what it is and has been what it is from its very beginning. It won't age, it won't corrode. However, the kingdom that's here on the earth requires us to take care of it. There are many examples that actually prove this. Take the Old Testament, for example. Take Abraham, for example. When God chose a people out from the world, when God chose Israel, he didn't have to. He could have started out by picking a nation that already existed. If God wanted to, he could have chose Egypt, or he could have chosen the land of Canaan the way it was and said, this nation will be my people. But he didn't. He started out with one man, and that was Abraham, and said, this will become the nation that will be my people. He started out with one man. One man can't make all that big of a difference, according to our eyes, that is, unless God is involved. If you think about it, Abraham was the mustard seed, and the nation Israel that came from him, that was the tree that sprouted from that single seed. God told him to leave his family, to leave the land that he grew up in his entire life. He traveled far from it, and God showed him the land that he said he'd give to him and his people, and he would bless him and make his family into a great nation. Now, at the time, Abraham didn't have any sons, but he knew he would because God promised. Now he grew impatient, admittedly, and as a result, he took Hagar, which was Sarah's handmaid, who was an Egyptian, and had a son with her. His name was Ishmael. Now here's things that people don't know, or at least they may know, but it's in the back of their minds. We always say Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and only one was the promised son. But if you read further and pay attention to the details, you'll notice those weren't Abraham's only sons. He had at least 6 more afterward. After Sarah died, he married another woman and had 6 more sons from her. And why is that important? Here's why. One of those 6, his name was Midian, which from him came the Midianites. And the reason this is important is because later on in Exodus, Moses, who is a descendant of Isaac, the son of Abraham, the promised son of Abraham, who was born in the tribe of Levi, fell in love with Jethro's daughter and took her to be his wife, and she and Jethro both are descendants of the Midianites. So they both are descendants of Abraham. For this, and I feel the need to point this out because we often like to say, well, if Abraham hadn't been impatient, the majority of the Middle East that is so hostile with Israel wouldn't exist. But I think we need to consider the other 6 sons that Abraham had. How many of those nations exist today that came from them also? We don't unless we do some really thorough studying, we don't know how many of these nations came from Ishmael and how many of the other nations came from the other six sons of Abraham. But I do think it's an important detail that we do need to take note of, because it stirs our mind. It gives us something to think about. But anyways, the point is you would think, because God promised Abraham that his people would become a great nation, that he would have sons left and right, like Adam and Eve did and their sons, because it mentioned that they all had children in abundance for each passing generation. But out of the 8 children he had, and he had only 8 in his life, so that alone would make you think, well, you can't really make a nation out of 8 people. But then, take it further, only one of those 8 was the promised son. So it was only through that one son, the great nation, which would later become Israel, would come out. Then what do you know? Isaac had twins. Jacob and Esau, examples of the elect and the non-elect. Once again, only one of these 2 sons is the promised son, the son that God remained with, even changing his name to Israel. Then through Israel, the 12 sons were born, which would later become the 12 tribes. So right there, we're seeing an example of something growing slowly, pace-wise. After the 12 sons are born, all of a sudden then, we're starting to see them multiplying. They're picking up the pace now. They're each becoming their own 12 families, but they're increasing in number. And throughout the entire time, every time they found themselves in a bad situation, God was there to not only deliver them out of that situation, but they came out of it with more possessions given to them by the kings of the nations that they would sojourn in. Then finally came the time when they were the nation, and God led them to drive out the Canaanites. But it was a very, very slow process. We're talking about from near the beginning of Genesis, right where God chose Abraham. Then you've got the read through. Now, if you read through it in the chronological order, then the wait's even longer, because you go through all of Genesis. Then chronologically, you go through the book of Job. Then you go through Exodus. Then you read through Leviticus, Numbers, which then they could have started driving out the Canaanites, but because of their disobedience, God punished them by making them wander in the wilderness for an extra 40 years. Then you read through Deuteronomy. Then you get to Joshua. Joshua, they finally cross over the River Jordan, but even then, the pacing was slow. They had to slowly drive the Canaanites out. And God told them this ahead of time. He says, the process will take so long that even in a year, you're not going to be able to get the job done, because this has to be done in such a way that the land isn't ruined by war, that things aren't left barren. We want to keep the land untouched and undamaged. So to do that, we're going to go about this at a pace I have set for all of you. So slowly, the Canaanites were driven out, but it took the entire book of Joshua to do it. And it wasn't until Judges, when they finally had claim over the land, where they finally had everything set up and they were able to live the way God promised. Look how long it took. Genesis, Job, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, 7 books. That's how long it took for the promise to be fulfilled. It took time. They had to grow. Started out with Abraham, the mustard seed that I call him right now, but he became the kingdom. Israel became that tree. And as far as the birds lodging, those birds, I believe, represent the sojourners, the people that come and go, the people that need rest, and they find rest in that land. They make their homes. But then the process repeats itself again. Only this time, in the New Testament, it repeats itself with Jesus, one man who chose 12 disciples, who later became the 12 apostles. And they kept sowing the seeds. They established the churches. And as we know, Christ is the foundation of the church. If the church is the tree that the mustard seed comes from, that makes Jesus the root of those trees. He's the one that holds us up. He's the one that makes us strong. He's the one that's able to make us withstand the things that we're able to withstand. But not just that. When we take care of the church the way we are supposed to, we are providing the branches for the people to come and sojourn with us. The people come and lodge with us. That's why he said the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that a man plants in his field. A seed that's the least of all the seeds, very tiny, and yet grows into a tree that's so great that the birds of the air can lodge therein. It becomes a home for them, a place that they desire to be in. When we take care of the church, it becomes a place for people to come and lodge with us, to sojourn with us, to live with us. It becomes a place that people spiritually desire to be. But we got to remember, seeds take time to grow. Don't expect quick results. Sometimes what appears to be no result at all may be the seeds working in them at a very slow pace, because that's how literal seeds work. God take that and apply it to the symbolicness of it, the spiritualness behind it. Sometimes it takes a long time for the seeds that we plant to grow inside people. But we also got to remember that while we wait, it is for us to water those seeds, to continuously take care of them, and pray that God helps us along the way. That's all I feel led to speak about for today. I thank every single one of you for listening. I hope all of you received a special blessing from this video, as I hope you do from all the videos I post. And just a reminder, I keep an eye out on Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I live stream my podcast once a month called the Primitive Baptist Podcast on my YouTube channel. And I leave a link under all my videos to my Venmo and Cash App account for optional donations if you wish to donate to the church. Donations are not required, but they are appreciated. Anyways, remember, the show thyself approved, rightfully dividing the word, put on the whole armor of God, and fight the good fight.